Welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast, where we share career stories, strategies, and lessons learned on how industry leaders and influencers have built their personal brands. Now, let's get started with the show. Hi, everybody. It's Paula Edgar, host of Branding Room Only, a podcast where I talk to influencers and industry leaders about their personal brands, their reflections on their experiences, and some recommendations they have about personal branding. And I'm super excited today to be talking to my guest, Olga Mack, who is a thought leader in the future of law space. Olga, welcome to the Branding Room.
Oh, hello, Paul. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. I think it's one colorful lady with another.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. But just our pre-call, I was like, oh, this is going to be fabulous. So, all right, let's jump on in. So I ask everybody this question. How do you describe or define a personal brand?
I think it's a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
People change. Circumstances change.
Mm-hmm.
And I see one's brand as an evolving process of discovering yourself, your limits, and learning your skills. So Olga today is a very different Olga than Olga yesterday. And yes, she is most certainly a very different Olga from 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So describe today's Olga in 3 words or short phrases.
Oh, picture of law. We all have a broken relationship with justice and law. I would love to see change in my life.
Ooh, I love that. I want to jump into that a little bit more later. Okay.
Small goals, small goals.
I just want to change the world. I'm with you 100%. Let's do this. Okay. Do you have a favorite quote or mantra?
It changes. I love this there are many quotes around going with the flow. Mm-hmm. And that one probably has been the most difficult thing to do, because when we find ourselves under circumstances, we often wish for different. Mm. Oh, I wish I could travel more, or I wish I could travel less. Those are silly things. But I think over time, I'm learned to focus on what is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My passion leads me to travel a lot. And therefore, I should find joy in it and optimize that experience. That's a silly example. That's actually a very true example. I'm now exceedingly good at traveling, and you can send me anywhere in the world, and people will say, oh, that's a boring place. I can tell you there are no boring places. There are boring people.
Agreed.
But in any place, you can find a gem, mm-hmm. Whether it's a restaurant, a person, a sculpture, an experience. There's going to be something there in the middle of nowhere that you can make your travel fantastic.
I love that. No, for multiple reasons. A, because I love traveling. I love being on an airplane and getting someplace. And my word of the year is joy. So you said everything that made me, I'm like, oh, I feel happy already about this. Okay. So do you have a hype song? So a hype song is when they're going to get full 100% Olga Mack, that song is playing in your head. Or if you're having a bad day and you need the song to hype you up, that's the song. So it's either the same song or different songs.
I don't have a song. I love music. I love and I can enjoy music. I am myself do not have a beautiful voice. So please do not, whatever is going to be next, definitely do not ask me to sing. I am a really good dancer. Singing is not my virtue. I've been appreciating, I can appreciate a range of music from country to pop, rock, to classical music. I lately enjoyed essential collage of mixtures of classical and pop. So there's a DJ I follow on Instagram who does this really cool mix of Vivaldi. So I can't stop listening to it. And it's just amazing.
Oh, you're gonna have no, now you're gonna have to share that with me so we can make sure we put that in the show notes because people are gonna want to know. But I love that. I love the range of music.
I mean, for context, I think he's a German guy who goes to Alps in this really severe cold, and he does these performances in the middle of the mountains, and he does this really ecstatic mix of Vivaldi and other stuff that I just can't get enough of.
I can't. Oh, I can't wait to hear it. I do think that music is what brings us all together because of how it makes us feel. So I love that. All right. Okay. So tell me, Olga, how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? And how did that help shape your personal brand?
Ooh, you asked that question of somebody who's immigrant. I believe you can't talk to an immigrant and not be shaped by that reality. I think in my case, I was the big headlights is when I was around 13. We landed in what I call Candyland, which is Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area. And my life completely transformed in that I saw myself in becoming an artist that makes the world a beautiful place. And I decided to become a technologist to make the world a more functional place. Eventually, I became a lawyer, and my dad said, well, is it nicer, more beautiful, or functional that you're going to be making this place? And I said, no, it's both. Um, and so that's the headlines. But, I was born in Ukraine, grew up in many places. My parents moved a lot, throughout my childhood. And I think that experience of being an outsider in many places, every language I speak with an accent and not with the perspective of a local. That is sort of a larger theme from the day I showed up. I guess if you want to go much deeper, I'm a miracle child. My
Tell me
parents
more.
were supposed to be childless. They waited and asked for someone like me for about 5 years, and I showed up. And my entire life, everyone told me I'm a miracle. I now thoroughly believe it.
I'm a big believer that we all are, but I really love that story for you. I love that story. That's fantastic. Yes, I agree that the immigrant experience, I am the child of immigrants. My parents are from Barbados and Jamaica. It does shape your perspective on so many things that I think folks who may be born here take for granted often. And also that there's this something I kind of know. There's always this a little more of a hustle. There's like a little bit more there. And I say that obviously with some bias because I'm a child of immigrants, and I was a beneficiary of the hustle. I guess we can call it beneficiary. I always knew that there were eyes on me differently than there were eyes on folks who were from here, and so that I like asking this question because where you're from is so different for everybody, right? Then how we answer it is so different for everybody, and it does shape us. All right, well, now share with me your career journey. You've done a lot. Talk about what you've done and how you built and evolved your personal brand along that path.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned hustle.
Mm-hmm.
I joke, I was born in the former Soviet. There were a lot of lines. I felt like my childhood was standing in lines, various food lines, really what it comes down to. So I am now intrinsically allergic, is maybe the right word, to lines. When I walk into a room and there is a real line or sort of assumed line, I have this involuntary reaction for an exit sign, an alternative strategy. And, I'm about to answer your question. That sort of has been a guiding light for me in my career. I'm a tech lawyer by design. And when I got to law, because I firmly believe in this concept of justice, we're political refugees, you bet that my household had opinions about, what justice means, and eventually why I went to law school. I got to law school, I discovered many assumed the real lines. Oh, you have to go to this law school, you have to study this, you have to wait your turn, this and that. And it's perpetual lines that this justice system assumes. And as much as I love law, and I specifically love tech law, which is where I practiced initially, where I started, as I've been encountering various lines, the immigrant of me that has an aversion to standing in line, you tell me a line, I'll look for an exit and the hustle to change the outcome. That has been really sort of how I ended up doing all these other things. I first went to big law, where I was told to stand in line to become a partner. And then I decided to go in-house, where I no longer had to stay in line. And then as I was a junior lawyer in-house, I was basically told to stay in line and live somebody else's legal dream. And I did not like that idea. And so I became the general counsel, the executive legal leader who created a new vision for that. And as I was doing that, I had this massive passion for technology and digitizing law, and became entrepreneur and started building the future of law and became the CEO. All of that really comes from the fact that when I see a line, I look for windows, chimneys, exit signs, anything and everything but standing in lines. And I do think that for us immigrants, standing in line is a losing strategy. Lines are not designed for those folks who are not local and in power to win. They're designed to keep you civil and obedient. And that's not how you optimize your life.
How do you define justice?
Wow, I've done a whole TEDx talk about it.
That was my transition.
No, I have a view of justice, that Lady Justice should stop being a snob, and she should start serving everyone. Not just everyone who's educated, and not just everyone who has resources, and certainly not just everyone who's of certain color and heritage. To me, what it means will evolve into something better when Lady Justice puts on her pink glasses on and starts actually serving, actually be of service. She doesn't have to be blind. She just has to be of service.
When you just talked about the sitting in lines and having the aversion to it, I thought to myself, I bet that everybody who has an immigrant experience can picture a line. And I have never really thought, I can clearly think about lines that I've stood on because of my family's immigrant experience, but never thought about how those lines shaped, literally shaped what we become. And so I really honor that you kind of drew the line to the line. You drew the line about lines for me, because I'm pretty sure people are going to message me about this. There's a point in the podcast always where I know that people are going to resonate, and I can feel it for this one, in that I haven't heard it articulated like that, and it just really is sitting with me. So thank you for drawing that line to lines for
yeah. So, anytime I'll connect dots for you. The line.
So, talk to me about some of the platforms, some of the networks that you've been involved in to help build your brand as you've gone from being in spaces where you didn't want to build everybody else's stuff, to building your own stuff, to shaping your own thing, and then realizing that innovation in tech is sort of the next wave. What were some of the ways, organizations, people, platforms that you used?
Oh, I've done a few things. I've written books, I've been on TEDx stage, I've sold companies, I've taught at, well-known institutions like Berkeley Law. Maybe I'll start with one thing, is that I don't think of myself as a brand. I think of myself as an Olga who likes to show up as Olga every time, because the easiest thing to do is to show up as yourself. You don't have to think twice. And I would like to enjoy that freedom. And in the process of showing up as myself, I would like to add value to people's lives. I would like them leave my interactions, whether it's one-to-one or one-to-many, enriched, more educated about their options. And if none of that, at least entertained, but preferably all of the above. Because what I realized, like, Paula, you and I will spend an hour together or 20 minutes.
Mhm.
And then if you have one-to-many conversations at scale, a lot of people giving you 20, 40, 60 minutes multiplied by number of watchers, that's lives we're talking about. And if you don't have value, you are wasting people's lives.
Mhm.
So for me, the goal is not to build a brand. For me, is one, to have a freedom, not to stand in line, show up as myself, and add value and live this world, not so necessarily solve every problem it has,
Mhm.
but leave value behind, leave legacy behind, live it a little better than I found.
We have that in common. And I love that everything you described about not having a brand is your brand. So I'm like, I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. So you talked about a bunch of things in your, talking about platforms, et cetera. And one of the things you mentioned was you're being a TEDx speaker 3 times over. Hello. So you talked about justice. What were the other two about?
So
And
spoiler alert, 2 more are coming.
oh yes, I
I
love it.
am a fan of TEDx
I love it.
stage.
Mhm.
Even though delivering a TEDx isn't a lot of work,
Mhm.
I think it's a fantastic place if you want to start change. I mean, by definition, it's a stage where ideas are shared.
Mhm.
I love that concept, provided that you have an idea worth sharing that will not be wasting millions of people's lives because it may be watched many people. I've done 3 TEDx talks, one about the power of technology called smart contracts, one about lady justice being of service. I've dedicated a whole TEDx talk to this because I really do think that this is a fundamental glitch in our system, in the software of our legal institutions called law. And the third is universal language for justice is actually not words, it's pictures. I think if you want to reach hearts and minds and provide value to an average person, you're going to have to definitely stop speaking legalese and start speaking human. And that's not an English of a highly educated person. That is an 8th grader level language. And if you really want to move proud, that would need to be a visually digestible experience. And so I talked about the power of visuals and how, if you travel, for example, or in the middle of COVID, pictures really dictate behavior.
That for me really resonates a lot. My father's a photographer. I have enjoyed pictures. I love pictures and I love taking photographs for my entire life. And I do think that they can tell a story and they can connect us in really, really powerful ways. To your point, that words can be barriers if you don't understand the words in the right way.
Yeah, more words doesn't increase clarity.
Exactly.
More words actually, if anything, confuses more people. But picture really speaks a lot.
Uh-oh, don't tell the lawyers that more words doesn't create clarity. Uh-oh. Okay. So can you talk a little bit? Well, this is selfishly because one of my goals is I want to do a TED Talk. What is the prep like? What was that experience like? And you're doing it more times, so that means that it couldn't have been that bad. So talk to me about what the prep was.
I enjoyed. I remember going with the flow.
Yeah.
I tried to find a joy in every circumstance, as opposed, and at the time, not retroactively. I don't want to go 20 years ahead and then look back and say, oh, that TEDx experience was really joyful. I actually want to enjoy it as I'm going through it. Anyway, when the first opportunity came to me to do my very first one, I actually declined. And it came from the San Francisco TEDx, which is one of the more prestigious ones. I didn't apply for it. I was invited with a specific topic in mind to talk about smart contracts. And at the time, I was very new in that field and felt underqualified, borderline incompetent to deliver that talk. That training was about a year, and TEDx San Francisco gave me a coach who was wonderful. And she was holding my hand throughout the whole process, and it was beautiful. And I enjoyed every moment because she was such a kind, generous person. And she was very blunt in saying, Olga, that's not a fierce Olga I know. that is a diluted version of Olga, I know, don't show up like this. The world does not need to see a diluted version of Olga. And that for over a year, this was a very transformative experience. And, it was in the nascent field. And actually, ironically, by the time I actually gave that talk, a TEDx talk, I was one of the more competent people in the field because it was such a new field and I grew up with it. And that was a very memorable experience that involved a lot of training and overthinking and drafting and redrafting. I've since then evolved. I can now deliver a TEDx talk in a much quicker timeline, provided that I have an idea worth sharing and perfected it to an art form. But in short, I think any idea is more exciting and digestible when delivered with a personal story, because we are wired to love stories, as my friend said, and many neuroscientists say that it's basically an orgasm for your brain. And so if you can make an idea driven by personal experience and a story that is engaging and stimulating, that would be desirable and very effective. And if you start with that and then draw 3 lessons out of it, and a call to action. That is the basic structure without bells and whistles for any TEDx talk. If you can do that, you can deliver 10 to 15 minutes of TEDx talk that is engaging, moves the world, and gives value to the listeners.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. So you are also an author. Check, check, check. Talk to me about why you wrote and wanted to collaborate on Visual IQ for Lawyers. Why?
Again, this is actually my 5th book. Okay. And this year I'm publishing 3. I published 4 more before. It's really interesting when people describe me as an author or, a writer or a speaker. And I sort of say, well, aren't we all writers and speakers? I mean, I just happen to perfect the elementary school skills and make it an art form. I think all of us are writers and speakers. It's just some of us are more detail oriented when it comes to the craft of it and care with how we show up and whether we actually intentionally continue perfecting that skill in our professional life. But yes, I write again for the same reason I speak, and those are usually actually related. Remember, I had a TEDx talk related to visual literacy and how it really can speak across different cultures. I'm writing a related book for lawyers so they can appreciate and incorporate visual elements in various parts of their practice so that they can be showing up more fully in daily life and their practices and more equipped, because we live in an increasingly visual world full of icons and emojis and communications that do not involve, 12th century or Shakespearean English or legalese. And increasingly your clients, speak to you in different ways and increasingly use technology that has visual elements. So being a 21st century modern lawyer requires you to be a modern human too. And that means you need to be literate in judging visual stimuli around you and actually be fluent in using them in your communication.
So when you describe what the future of law is the future of law, or part of the future of law, a place where lawyers understand that communication needs to be not just plain language, but plain visuals too, in order to get it?
Yes. It's, you asked me about the future of law. I like to talk about the vision, not the how, right? The vision, the why, is that it has to be of service. The how, yes, one of the hows is visual, but there are other hows that should be part of it.
Okay. Are there hows that you have been thinking? So I'm just thinking of where the conversation is going, like where you want to drive it, you want people's eyes and attention to go to, but also where you think. So, I think future of law, I think number 1, diversity, it's not a question mark anymore. It's there, right? It's there, and we got to figure it out quickly. Also, technology and AI, and also thinking about like hybrid is the new state of being, right? We're sitting here on a computer, like those things are a part of the future, whether by will or won't, it's going to happen. Other things that when you think about where you want us to go as your vision that I didn't talk about or that you want to talk about more?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Again, of service as a sort of the main premise. I think, visual is part of it. Technology is a big component of it. As I alluded in the beginning, today our legal system really serves select, educated, highly resourced, skewing certain color folks. And this is not a political statement. This is just a, description of facts. And that underserves like 95+% of the population, not necessarily indigent, but just massive number of people underserved. And the only way to reach those folks and educate them and allow them to give them an opportunity to do right things in life is by meeting them where they are, giving them education that they can consume, because most of us are capable of making good choices in life, provided that we are educated in a timely manner in the language that we understand. And I don't mean English or French or Cantonese or whatever. I mean in the way that we actually can comprehend, understand importance, and be part of the conversation. And technology is a big part of it. Helping lawyers to be of service for really complex cases is definitely important. Distributing information and giving tools to the rest of the population that probably do not need a lawyer, but make legal decisions or part of legal events on a daily basis, from various contracts they sign to marrying. Marriage is a legal event.
Yes,
you really feel how legal it gets when you get divorced, which is too late to make various decisions. For example, opening a bank account is a legal event. You really feel how legal it is when you go through bankruptcy. None of that information, I don't care how wealthy you are, educated you are, when you open a bank account, most people do not know what they just signed.
Right.
I, as a lawyer, have no idea what I signed.
And there's a stack of paperwork.
And there's a stack of paperwork, right? There's a wall of paper, and it's, your insurance policy. Have you read the insurance policy?
I have actually read my insurance policy. I'm proud to say that, yes, I have read my insurance policy. But to your point, because I was making sure that something that was happening was going to be an issue, right? So like we had a storm coming. I needed to make sure we had flood insurance, like right, all of those pieces were in there. And so I think your point is right that we get it, the legal piece of it, when the stuff hits the fan.
When at that point you're mitigating damage, right? Yeah. But if you were educated at the point of purchase, I mean, are you capable to make a right purchasing decision if you have full information? You bet I am. Every time I buy shoes, when I have full information, I buy the right pair. So I'm completely capable of buying right stuff, provided I'm educated at a point of purchase. If I can buy shoes, I can buy insurance, provided that I'm educated.
Agreed. I mean, it's accessibility, right? And I love that you bring it up as a point. So if you think about the people we navigate with, the legal professionals, what advice, given what you know, what you've seen, would you give to folks who want to be more innovative, want to think about the future of law, and also want to build their brand? Like what's coming up for you in terms of things that you would want to tell the people? What's your impact going to be in terms of your voice in this moment about what you want them to know?
Wow, you just asked a lot of questions. So
I know.
Maybe I will answer some, and if I
answer the one you want,
follow-up question. That's really interesting. I think starting with self and what's important to you. Showing up as yourself is more important to some than others. It is extraordinarily important to me. And so I just, I've tried many times in my life to fit into a box, to show up as a diluted version of self. It turns out I'm incapable of doing it. This gene of people pleasing is just completely missing. It's not going to show up in my lifetime. So I can sort of mitigate the damage, or I can just go with, with that path and make the most of it. So for me, it's very important. It's not going to be most important for you. So understanding sort of the values that you care about and your why, I think is very important.
Yeah.
I think the second thing, as I mentioned, is, is to have that vision, that anchoring vision. I think the why is always more important than who, and those two are definitely more important than what, and then those three are more important than how. So if you have an articulated why, it's a much better statement of a vision. And I joke, if you are a how to my why, we're gonna be best friends. And I mean it to humans, and I also mean what you call platforms. If a TEDx gives you a how to your why, then that's the right place. If a book gives a how to your why, then it is the right place. Meaning you will reach the right audience, whether it's a one of many, to make progress from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So whatever your why, if you have clarity, and make best friends with the how. And when you use the how, that brings me to the last point, give value. So that whomever you engage, whether it's one or many, for however long, from 5 seconds to hours, they come out without their life wasted. If you can do that, I think you can create an impactful life worth living.
My favorite word, impact. Impact. Okay, so what about the fun stuff, Olga? What do you do for fun?
It's funny, it's interesting that you separate fun from this. To be completely honest with you, this is fun. It's interesting, because we as lawyers are trained to have an analytical analysis of laws and facts. And we are trained to what I call bifurcate, trifurcate, and beyond issues, like separate things, laws from facts, life from laws, business from laws. Oh, this is a business question, and this is a legal question. That's not how humans work. Humans do not bifurcate their analysis. You go to a business owner and tell them to separate their business from their legal obligations. Heck, let's make it even more relatable. Go to somebody who's getting divorced and may not like their ex-spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse, and tell them, for the purposes of the settlement, to make a rational decision, separate law from life. Good luck to you in that conversation. That's not going to happen.
Right.
So this segregation of fun and work, or I've done that before, and it took me about 15, 20 years to figure out that this thing that I was doing for fun, which is future of law, that writing and speaking and advising, I could actually be paid for this. That actually could be my job. I could be paid to show up, to have fun every day.
Yeah.
And that realization was very important for me. It only took, I have a very steep learning curve sometimes, it took about 15 years. It's still unbelievable to me. But I actually don't separate it. I know how to have fun in other places. I thoroughly enjoy all kinds of things. I really like anything on wheels. So if you give me somewhere between roller skates and bike and car, I really enjoy that experience. I love speed a lot. I like putting myself on objects that move and try to balance. It really gives me a lot of joy to challenge my physical body. I have 2 teenagers who challenge me in many ways, and my definitions and the way I look at the world, from valuing kind of more virtual goods to having a much more sophisticated view of of race and gender that I'm still a student of, that I really enjoy spending time with them. And then, I'm a trained artist. Remember, at some point of my life, I thought I would be an artist. I have a formal training in art, and sometimes I like to create. So there are other things I do for fun, but I definitely do not segregate fun from work as much as I used to. Still work in progress.
Agree with that. I love that as a thing. I believe in joy in everything we do, even when it doesn't necessarily feel joyful, to find the joy in it. But I definitely will say there are some things that I love that are fun, just on their own, that have nothing to do with work. But I love it when they intersect, though. I do love to work with people who are fun. I love to do things that are fun while I'm working. And so I do get that. It doesn't need to be bifurcated, but unfortunately, too many people do see it as silos, right? Like, here's my fun me, here's my work me, and the twins, they shall not cross. And I'm like, oh no, if you're working with me, they're gonna cross, because I love a joke and I love to smile. And so all of that. Fabulous. Okay. So I asked two questions to everybody on my podcast. One is your stand by your brand piece. And I think I'm gonna be able to guess what your answer is, but I'll ask you.
No, go. I want to know. What would you guess?
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask the question and I'll tell you what I think you're going to say. Okay. So the question is, what is the authentic aspect of your personality and personal brand that you will never compromise on? And I think that your answer would be in justice and being future forward thinking. So
yeah. And for me, also showing up as myself.
Authenticity. Authentically doing that.
It's beyond that. Authenticity. It's, authenticity, I often feel is an overused term.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little bit beyond authenticity. It is really, truly, what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. When I immigrated, I was 13 or so. I did not speak English.
Mm-hmm.
And it started as a joke that people asked me what I want to be when I grow up. I would say I want to be a lawyer, except everybody knew that I didn't speak English, and everybody would just sort of stare at the 13-year-old or 15-year-old when she says that, either with an accent or a really broken English. And I initially did it because I just sort of want to create this uncomfortable, awkward moment and stare and see you struggle. Because, to be a lawyer, you really ought to be born here, because English is the tool that you use to, win cases. Mm-hmm. And yet this girl who's adorable tells you that she wants to be one, and you don't want to be the person who tells her no. And so you are standing there in the internal conflict, like, that's cute, not realistic, but I don't want to be the one telling her that. So I've done it many, many times. And then at some point I would just, have this conversation with my dad. I would say, Dad, I noticed people cannot imagine that I become a lawyer. And my dad said, Olga, have you also noticed that people don't have an imagination?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Dad. Exactly that. So, exactly that. Wow. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love it. And good. I mean, again, when you think about the experience being, growing up, it's who and sort of the values and the messaging that you get from parents too, right? Because if it was, no, you can't be a lawyer, right? Okay, as opposed to you can be whatever you're gonna like we can get to that space. That also gives you a freedom to be more you.
That experience happened when I wanted to be an artist, by the way, because I actually was not skilled at all. Mm-hmm. In fact, so much so that my mother so in Ukraine, where I was born, they used to rank your kids' art from best to worst when they display to the parents. And mine was always first from the back, meaning that I was not particularly skilled at drawing. And so my best friend decided to go to art school, and I went to my mother and I said, Mom, I would like you to pay for my art school. I'm now going to spend 45 days after school for 35 hours, perfecting this thing of drafting, painting, sculpture. My mom said, "Oh, you sure you want to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, that's where my best friend is going, and I would like to spend more time with her." And it's really interesting. They sort of went with it. They encouraged me to go and pay for the lessons, and we're sort of cheerleading. And I think all of us in the process learned that it was actually a learned skill to paint, to draft, to sculpt,
Yep.
to do all kinds of things. And that lesson that most skills are you're not born with, you actually learn.
Yeah.
It was very powerful.
Yes, I'm remembering my art class in in high school, and I'm sure that if my art teacher listens to this podcast, will be like, Paula, you were at the back of the line. you, you did not learn, in fact.
But that means if you are in the back, that everything you do is a miracle.
Right.
Like you can't get any worse than that. You're already in the back.
I was ready for progress. That's exactly, I love that perspective. Okay. So in closing, the last question I ask my guest is, the term branding room only is a play off the term standing room only, which I want you to tell me, what is a skill or an experience that about you that people would stand in a room, standing room only, to see your experience about Olga Mack?
Oh, by the way, we just came back to the line.
Yes, we did.
Basically, just asked me what would people stand in line to hear Olga speak about.
They don't have to be in line; they could just be standing.
Standing room. Very interesting. I think it's the number one question people ask me is how you pivot. I've never had the same job twice. And it's partially because of this perpetual looking for a place with no line and creating opportunities and showing up as self. Partially because I'm a woman of many interests and think that talents can be developed and learned and built. Yes. And I really have enjoyed the process of doing it. And so number one question people ask me is either specifically how I generally transition and pivot, or how I pivoted from one place to another, that people actually considering pivoting today, from big law to in-house, for example, career from being an attorney on a team to being the general counsel, to then being a strategist, to then being a CEO, to speaking at a TEDx talk, how to do it more than once. But those things, the pivots, I think I at this point have mastered the art of pivots.
Well, I love that because I do think a skill set in terms of building your brand and iterating and pivoting when necessary, and when your strategy is that you want to do something different, which I think everybody who knows listening to this knows that I love that. I love hearing people's stories because they may think that their career is going to be a straight line, but it really never is. It is a lot of hills and valleys. And with that, Olga, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast and telling your story about not being in the lines, being outside of the lines, because that's where you belong. You want to not be in lines. And you're welcome to come back at any time to talk about whatever you would like. And everybody, share this with a friend who shouldn't be living in the lines either. We'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.
You're so welcome.